Welcome back, everyone. Real quick here, I don't do these videos very often anymore because as we see the inevitability of support for cannabis on this graph here, and this graph starts in 1970, and wait, hold on, let's see if we can get this bigger. Yeah, there we go. So, we're looking at the Gallup poll that started in 1970. I think it might even have started earlier than that. And we remember the first arrest of John Sinclair in the 1970 area and the movement to legalize marijuana, the rallies, Normal starting, High Times magazine kicking off. All that happened in this area here. And then there was kind of a long depressing dip, that just slow, long, just dip, where the war on drugs that Nixon initiated right here started to get a lot of support from Republicans and Democrats both, all the way through the 90s, where the prison industrial complex built up around this war on drugs. And the more people that got arrested, the more people support legalizing marijuana. And then we got the 2000s where, I don't know, just another kind of a slow, there was other things going on maybe. And then the movements to legalize marijuana really started picking up steam around 2012 when decriminalization movement started sweeping the nation. More people were legalizing medical marijuana. People were starting to see that medical marijuana was a good thing and that it works, and support has just been growing ever since. Ever since it hit 50 around 2010, 2011, it's just been going up from there, and now we're at 66% in the Gallup poll. 66% is 2/3 of the population. That's a supermajority in political terms and democracy terms, if you want to put it that way. Let's go ahead and read this Tom Angel article real quick over in Forbes. 2/3 of Americans now support legalizing marijuana, the highest percentage ever in a Gallup ongoing decades-long series of national polls on the topic. The new survey released on Monday shows that the U.S. adults back ending cannabis prohibition by a supermajority margin of 66% to 32%. And that's more than 2 to 1. It is the third year in a row that the firm, which was polling about marijuana for 49 years, has found a record-breaking increase in support. When Gallup first polled America on legalizing marijuana in 1969, just 12% said they were in favor. As recently as 2005, barely 1/3 of Americans were on board. Last year, the survey pegged legalization's favorability at 64%. In addition to the 2-point bump in support since then, opposition also decreased 2 percentage points from 2017's level of 34%. Support for legalization has spiked considerably in key demographics over the past year. For example, there has been a 9-point increase among older Americans, with 59% of those aged 55 and over now saying it is time to end marijuana's criminalization. And Republican support is rising as well, with 53% backing legalized marijuana this year as compared to 51% in 2017, the first year the poll found a majority of GOP voters in favor. And then here we have, oh, whoops. This is all political parties. I did a meme with this in it not too long ago. The Democrats are at 75, and this is the Gallup. So the poll I looked at had Democrats at 78. But we'll just go with this. 70, 75, 71 of independents, and 53 for Republicans. So broad support by everyone, no matter what their affiliation is, or no affiliation. Just 45% of Republicans told Gallup this year that they oppose making cannabis legal, a 4-point drop from 2017. combined with the jump in those saying they are in favor of policy change, there was a net 6-point swing in GOP attitude towards marijuana legalization and away from prohibition over the past 12 months. Gee, I wonder if that has anything to do with like John Boehner jumping aboard and just basically Trump, the way Trump's rhetoric, all the way back to 2015. Trump was asked about it, and every time he was consistently, basically like, yeah, it's just weed, whatever, maybe it's the state's right. Legalize, and he always said medical should be legal. It's everybody agrees on that, and that's pretty true. Like if you look at the polling on medical marijuana, I think it's pretty unanimous. Like it's over 90% of Americans believe that medical marijuana should be legal. Or I think if you change the question to like should somebody be arrested if they used marijuana medicinally? And that definitely gets a hell no. Legal marijuana support is at an all-time high. Democrats 75, independents at 71. The poll also found that regional differences in attitudes about cannabis are starting to dissipate. People on the East Coast are now slightly more likely to back legal marijuana than those out west, with all areas in the country favoring policy change at roughly the same rate, 67% in the East and 65% in each of the Midwest, South, and West. And there is no sign the year-over-year increase in support is slowing down. Like the support for gay marriage and in prior years in interracial marriage, support for marijuana legalization has generally only expanded, even if slowly, over the course of multiple decades, raising the question of where the ceiling in support might be, Gallup's Justin McCarthy wrote. Indeed, support is huge among Americans, with 78% of those aged 18 to 34 younger Americans calling for cannabis to be legal. It is time for lawmakers to acknowledge the data-driven and political realities of legalization, said Normal Political Director Justin Streckel. Quote, it is time to stop ceding control of the marijuana market to untaxed criminal enterprises and implement common-sense, evidence-based regulations governing cannabis personal use and licensed production by responsible adults. Yeah. I mean, I would also add it's time to like stop doing the over-the-top, caution about this legalization with baby steps of ending prohibition and all that. He said, our time has come. The survey was conducted between October 1st and 10th prior to Canada's cannabis legalization law going into effect last week. Several other recent national polls have shown strong support for cannabis reform. Earlier this month, the Pew Research Center, for example, found that 62% of Americans support ending marijuana prohibition. Quote, there is a growing sense among the U.S. population that it is time to end our nation's failed experiment with marijuana prohibition, Steve Hawkins, executive director of the Marijuana Policy Project, said. There are not many issues out there that enjoy majority support among both the major political parties and in every region in the country. This support is consistently translating into wins at the ballot box, and it should further motivate elected officials to take action at the state and federal levels. Hopefully lawmakers are paying attention to this clear trend in public opinions. If they ignore these polls, they do so at the risk of seeing a drop in their own, Hawkins said. And that's what, that's another thing about that 66%. That basically tells you that no matter what your political, whoever you are, and in some cases it might threaten your political career, depending on where you are, what you're running for, how bad your constituents want to legalize marijuana in their area, especially like when you're talking about people that are looking at states right next door or whatever that have legalized, and it's like, man, what the hell? What's the holdup? The positive reports of legalization favorably come as several U.S. states prepare to vote on cannabis measures in November. And on that note, let's just say that we know that the polling in Michigan looks like it's a foregone conclusion, but don't let that stop you from going to vote yes for it. We know the same can be said in Missouri if somehow the ballot measures split And the one that should pass is Amendment 2, which is by New Approach Missouri, right? Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure. But anyway, let's just say that we had good news everywhere except for North Dakota on the November 6th election. Well, it looks like we have good news there too, and I'm going to go ahead and read this real quick. Legalized North Dakota poll shows 51% favor recreational marijuana, but opponents doubt the numbers. And sure, you always got to, like, you know, when the people that want to do something have a poll and they're like, well, look, this is what we found. You always got to question it, but I don't know, it seems like that happens all the time, and the polls aren't usually that far off. If not, they are right. And when you have this many people that support it, maybe that will motivate more people to. Or this level of support is not matched by the level of people that have a passion to go vote against it. We're just going to leave it at that. So a poll released Sunday, October 21st by the Legalized North Dakota showed that 51% of North Dakotans support legalizing recreational marijuana, with 36 opposed. That's a 5% increase in support from the group's last poll in May. 13% of North Dakotans were undecided, the poll said. However, opponents dispute the poll and announced late last week that the list of state organizations opposing the measure continues to grow. Of course, Bob Wiefeld, chairman of the North Dakotans Against the Legalization of Recreational Marijuana. You know what I like about that, guys? Is that name is basically what they are. You know, they're not like the one in Michigan and the other ones we've seen in the past where it's like responsible and healthy Michigan, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, you're just North Dakotans against the legalization of recreational marijuana. That's what you are. That's what your name says. Thank you for keeping it real. All you people that do these stupid, like, oh, we're going to do this clever naming thing where people are going to see the name and be like, oh, yeah, if we don't legalize marijuana, we'll be healthy and productive. Well, you know, that's just stupid. And that was automatically a strike against you by people with common sense and dignity. That you would use something that would be demeaning, insinuating that people that smoke weed are lazy stoners that have no motivation and aren't healthy somehow. So they also referred to two other recent polls that showed the opposite results. The two other polls by Fargo television station and another by a public relations firm in Bismarck showed more than 55% against the measure, with only about a third to almost 40% of likely state voters in favor. Aware of these polls, Cole Hammond, advisor to Legalized North Dakota, said he's encouraged by their latest numbers. Quote, the message of ending marijuana arrests is resounding in North Dakota, and these results demonstrate that voters are hearing our call for action. For months, I've been saying this is not in the bag. It's not a blowout that the last two polls have suggested. We just don't think those polls have been in line with the demographics of the state. Quote, our support has grown as we've gotten the word out, Hammond said. And this poll shows that we have gained. This is the dogfight, and it's not a runaway ball game. Hammond said FBI statistics show that the state is 47th in usage of marijuana per capita, but 6th highest in marijuana possession arrests. And I've always said to people, you know, I have a list in my brain of the worst states you could possibly go to with 35 grams of weed. And North Dakota is on that list. And so is Missouri, Mississippi, Alabama. I mean, right off the top of my head, I can rattle off the states that you don't want to get caught with weed in. And North Dakota has always been one of them. So, anyway. One more time. It's the 47th in usage, but yet 6th in possession arrests. Quote, it's time to stop tearing families apart, he said. Legalized North Dakota is quick to point out that driving under the influence and distribution to minors will remain illegal and strengthen if Measure 3 is approved, and that current laws regarding smoking in public will apply to marijuana as well. Westfield has a different take on the issue and has been encouraged in recent days with the continuing number of organizations and business groups that have joined the opposition. The latest was North Dakota United, which is a union group of state employees and teachers who said they were opposing the measure but not joining the coalition against it, said Wellfield, a former judge and state attorney general. Quote, "We couldn't be more excited to have this incredible united philosophical support from people and organizations from so many business sectors, education, law enforcement, healthcare, utilities, city and county officials." Utilities? I know my electricity company has no problem with what I do. City and county officials, state officials, legislators, contractors, several chamber of commerce, churches, and the list keeps growing every day. And that's the same list that I always see of people that are opposed to marijuana legalization. It's all the people that have hierarchies in place where they work, and they have nothing but a bunch of drama to try to get a raise in life, and everything is like, oh, Bob smokes weed. So even if people are smoking weed in any of those sectors, it's because they're real closeted about it, and they're definitely outspoken against weed whenever they get a chance to do it, because it's projectionism and they just want to, look good for the boss or whatever. The latest poll from the Kitchens Group based in Orlando, Florida, polled 412 likely state voters from October 11th to October 14th and had a margin of 4.9% with a 95% confidence level. In its conclusion, it stated, Measure 3 has the support of likely voters in North Dakota. It has strong support from voters under the age of 50. Passage of Measure 3 is greatly dependent upon the voters under the age of 50 voting in at least their historical percentages. As in, y'all need to get out and vote for this if you want it to pass, you younger than 50-year-old people. If the electorate is skewed towards the older, more conservative voters, passage could be problematic. The latest television poll commissioned by KVLY-TV in late September by Strategic Research Associates of Austin, Texas, surveyed 650 likely voters with a margin of error of 3.8%. That poll showed 59% opposed to the measure with just 30% support and 11% undecided. So I got my fingers crossed, and I'm knocking on wood and throwing the salt over the old shoulder, whatever it takes, man, to help on the ground out there. And one thing you can't do is you can't sit on your hands on this kind of an election. All right? Probably really won't matter too much in the grand scheme of things in North Dakota, what else you vote for. But even if you don't smoke weed, you should vote yes to legalize it, because there's nothing but good outcomes. And that's the truth. And whenever they talk about these so-called bad outcomes, which never came true for Colorado or Washington or anywhere else, just keep in mind that when it comes to those bad outcomes don't change whether you legalize weed or keep it illegal. But the only thing you add to the bad outcomes by having it illegal is now you can get caught with it and go to jail. And that's pretty much it. And if you're one of these people that hate weed and stoners and whatever and all that, well, you know what? I don't think anyone's ever going to change your mind unless you smoke weed, so fuck off. And that's all I got on this. The numbers are in. The support is there. Pressure your politicians. Tell them to start representing you and everyone else that is just straight up sick and tired of this ridiculous so-called war on drugs. This ridiculous prohibition on marijuana that has been going on for 80 plus years. It hasn't done anything good. Prohibiting cannabis has not done anything good. It hasn't kept kids from smoking weed. That's one of their, the reefer madness. It hasn't kept people from smoking weed and driving cars. Prohibiting weed hasn't stopped anyone from selling anybody any weed. It hasn't stopped anybody from growing weed. In fact, I've been growing weed my whole life. And I started when I was I started when it was heavily illegal. That's all I'm going to say. So take what you want out of it. and go vote for yes to legalize weed wherever you're at if that's on the ballot.